My daughter wants her kidney back and she's definitely not taking no for an answer. My daughter was only 5 years when I met my husband. I met my husband at the hospital when I sent my daughter to the hospital because she had malaria. When we were about to leave the hospital, I overheard my husband literally begging the doctors on duty to allow him take his son home and come back later on to pay his bills. The doctors on duty, however, refused to heed to his plea, so the man obviously looked sad and frustrated. Out of pity, I settled this man's child's hospital bill and I left the hospital immediately. He later ran to thank me for my generosity, and that was how our relationship began. I later learned from this man that the woman with whom he had his son left the child with him when the boy was only 5 months old because life was really hard for him after he had lost his job. I later helped this man to get a job, and after 2 years of being friends with him, we got married. I, on the other hand, was a businesswoman, so I usually travel to either China or Turkey for my goods. And while I am usually away for such trips, my husband would take very good care of our children and our home, which I very much appreciate. My daughter became so fond of him because of how he took very good care of her. The two children really became so close, as though they were real siblings, and you could not even tell that they had two different mothers. Later on in our marriage, my business was doing so well, so I helped my husband with some money and he started his own business as well, which later yielded so much money, more than my business. Unfortunately, my husband sadly fell ill and we found out that both of his kidneys were in a very bad state. According to the doctors, the only solution to his problem was to get him a donor as soon as possible. We were really worried because we couldn't get him a donor and his health was fast deteriorating. Interestingly, I convinced his own son to test if they were compatible, but his son emphatically told me he couldn't take that risk because it was too dangerous. My daughter later on requested that she would like to run the test to check if they were eligible or compatible, and miraculously, they were perfect match. My daughter said he really loved my husband so much and was willing to help him with one of her kidneys. So the surgery was later performed and both my daughter and my husband healed really fast and life became beautiful once again in our household. Then one day when I returned from one of my business trips, my husband told me he had wanted to discuss something very important with me. He later explained that the mother of his son came back to beg him while I was away on my trip and he wanted to accept her back in his life. He went further to explain that he couldn't really say no to her because they were high school sweethearts and he actually never stopped thinking about her even though she abandoned him and his son. He also went on to say that he was ready to compensate me with huge amounts of money so that I could continue with my life. And when my daughter heard this, she completely went angry and immediately requested for her kidney back. I told her to forget about it and leave everything in the hands of God for God to judge him and to deal with him, but she said no. She told my husband that she'd do anything in order to have a kidney back as long as my husband didn't care about how I was feeling at the time and how ungrateful and inconsiderate that he had been. Is my daughter doing too much, or do you think that her demand is justifiable?